Okay, good evening. My name is Donovan O'Connell. It is 7:03 on March 11th. I would like to, seeing as we have a quorum, I would like to call to order the meeting of the North Andover Finance Committee. Our first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. You'd all please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. So our next item on the agenda is public comment. I am seeing no public comment. See, where's Stan Limpert when you need him? Okay.
He's probably at the town hall.
Yeah, he's probably at town hall, exactly. Well, that's a good segue, seeing as tonight is all about the school budget with the superintendent and assistant superintendent. We decided to come on a road trip and visit you guys back like the old days when the finance committee used to meet here. So if you guys want to step up, and I know you provided us with a oops, I just clicked off it, a presentation and a spreadsheet. Did everybody get that? Yep. Okay, good. Okay, so without further ado, Drs. Gilligan and Mealy, the floor is yours.
Well, thanks for having us tonight.
You're welcome.
We're thrilled to be here. And for those who don't, for the viewing audience at home, I know you could have some high ratings here tonight. So
Don't underestimate our ratings.
no, I think we're in competition, though, aren't we, with downtown, the meeting down there?
No,
they
canceled. They moved theirs.
Oh, they did.
Yep.
Okay.
So, I thought.
Well, we're thrilled to be here tonight. We're here to talk about the school committee voted budget that we voted this past early February. And like you mentioned, here with me is Dr. James Mealy. And tonight we're going to start out a little bit about how the school budget is funded and the various funding sources. And then we're going to walk you through the key steps of the budget and what we have. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Mealy. Oh, and he's already up there.
Look at him.
All right, Dr. Mealy.
Okay, so we do like to kind of review, especially sometimes there's more new people on the FinCom than there are right now, but I'll go through it fairly quickly. Most of you know this, that our school department budget is made up of many parts, not just the operating budget, which is what we are mostly talking about tonight. So the general fund, also known as the operating budget, that includes shared expenses such as IT and facilities with the town. We have revolving accounts, we have grants, we have circuit breaker, which is a direct reimbursement to the town from the claims from the previous year. We have capital projects, so the capital plan that it has school projects, that's our part. And then indirect expenses show up. We have to do an end-of-year report, and we have to report every single penny we spend in a year from all funds, and the state uses that to compare districts, and that's where you'll see the statistic for per pupil spending, because it's a true apples-to-apples comparison, because all districts, wherever those funds are coming from, are reporting all the money they spend in the year. And then shared expenses, the consolidated departments I mentioned earlier. So the general fund, annual operating expenses, big parts of that are the salaries, contracted services, and supplies, mostly salaries. It's funded through local taxes and governed by federal and state regulations. And the benefit that we have is that we can transfer between budget lines. So when we get approval for the budget in May, things change before the next school year starts, and it might be that we need to add another class at the ABECC because we have more kindergarten students than we thought we were going to. And so we'll have to take the funds from somewhere else and hire a teacher and a teaching assistant. So we do need that ability. The revolving accounts, they're individual accounts set up for very specific programs. Revenues come in and the expenditures go out. The source of the funding is from fees and donations that they get, mostly fees. And We have two that are what you might call enterprise funds. They're completely independent. Our food services department and our community programs department, all of their expenses are paid from the revenues that they bring in. Our food services in particular used to just make it each year, but since COVID, this is one of the positive outcomes, is that because of all the free meals and now the state's adopted free lunch, they get a reimbursed for every meal they make and provide. And so they actually have some extra funding. This is consistent with districts throughout the state. And they're looking for ways to invest back into the food services, whether that's additional food offerings or improvements to, we've replaced some freezers and capital equipment, things like that. And then community programs, you're familiar with those. Rick does a great job offering many different programs. And then the bigger ones that are in conjunction with the general fund or operating budget. Transportation, we do collect fees. The revolving account, all those fees go towards the contract, and the rest comes out of the operating budget. Same with athletics and the preschool. And one thing we've been seeing with all of our revolving accounts is an impact on the revenues coming in with the increase in free and reduced eligibility. So the revenues have gone down over the years on those.
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
So the distinction between the two different buckets is the one that's in conjunction with the general fund is kind of subsidized by the general fund?
You could say subsidized, yeah.
It's not fully covered by the fees and so forth.
Exactly. There's no way we could pay for all of our transportation or the athletics or preschool with just the fees. Mm-hmm. But those fees that are generated can only be used for the specific revolving account.
And can I ask a question as well? I should know this, but I don't. When is free lunch going to continue in perpetuity, or is there a
We hope.
Okay.
Right. So right now it looks like it,
Okay.
but it's interesting, right? Because a couple of years ago the state seemed to be flush with money, and it was a no-brainer. And then it was almost doubtful that they were going to continue it, but they did. And we're hopeful that it will just continue, that it'll become a permanent feature.
Okay, great.
So,
Yeah.
sorry, before you leave that, so if we looked at the spreadsheet that was within the presentation, this $2 million that's for transportation, that's the fees portion, that's money coming in from fees and from.
No, in the operating, it's only that's the operating
just
portion
the
of
operating
it.
portion.
Yes.
Okay, so it's $2 million from the operating budget and then some other amount
It's
that comes from fees.
somewhere between 270, 290,000 a year that we collect in fees.
Okay.
Yep.
And just back to the school lunch, because it's easy sometimes for us, we get so many notifications. So it was free last year, and then they continued it through the summer. And I think whenever the governor finally got to voting on her budget, closer to September than the end of the school year, they did vote it through to be free, permanently free, universal lunch until notified otherwise.
Next category are grants. They certainly supplement the general fund. We have federal and state grants governed by very strict rules and much more restrictive in making changes once a budget's been approved. The grants and the amounts of these grants approved annually by the awarding entity. They include special education grants, title grants for disadvantaged students, professional development grants, COVID relief grants, earmarks. We had an earmark a year, or it might have been 2 years ago, for installing bubblers in our schools. That came in handy. And now there's an earmark that we just recently got for library books.
Sorry.
Yep.
Are the ESSER grants done?
They're done.
Or- okay.
Completely done. Yep. And then the circuit breaker I mentioned earlier, it's a reimbursement. So there are eligible expenses for special education, and it's per student. So if a student, and what they do is they say it's 4 times the state per pupil amount. And for FY24, that was $12,930.25. 4 times that is $51,721. So any student that we spend more than $51,721 on, each amount over that is eligible for circuit breaker reimbursement. So mostly that's our out-of-district placement students, because most tuitions are above that. And it now includes transportation costs, which is great, because all of those out-of-district students are getting transported, and it's pretty costly. So that was big. And it's funded from state allocations. When I first started working here, this is my 15th year now, it was touch and go. It would be like 60%, 62%. They always said, oh, we want to get 75, but they didn't come close. It's been 75 probably for the last 4 or 5 years now, because if we have $2 million in eligible expenses that we report the following year, the most we'll get is 75% of that. And like I said, that max has been what we've been getting. And that comes directly to the school department. And it's always been the case since I've been here that when we budget for out of district, we include the anticipated amount of circuit breaker as part of our expenditures for out of district. So it's not like it's a reserve of any kind.
Right.
We are including that. And so if we expect to be $5 million and we think we're getting $1.5 million, we'll have $3.5 million in our budget line for out of district. And capital projects, you're all familiar with those. Funds used to build and replace or improve facilities, grounds, and mechanical and technological infrastructure. So we have an annual amount for IT. We have an annual amount for the exterior of our buildings. Steve Foster works with us to identify building needs, and we'll put those in as we're made aware of them. It's through local taxes. It's all part of, and approved at town meeting as a group as part of the capital improvement plan. And we do include those when we, in our indirect expenses as whatever the payments are that year if they were bonded.
I have a quick question.
Yep.
Anything in our budget allow for preventative maintenance, or is it just all reactive?
Well, it's not, we're not as preventative as we would like. We have a pretty good list of, deferred projects, but we do have a line of $212,000 a year, and that's for, checking the equipment, oil, filters, inspections are done every year, so all of those are included.
Okay. Have you found that to be a worthwhile activity, or is it tough to allocate the funds for something that doesn't really pay off that year? Is it tough to kind of find the discipline to?
We've been pretty good about keeping that money there and making sure that gets done each year, because we know the consequences of not doing it.
Sure.
Yep.
Thanks.
And then the shared expenses, they are technology and facilities are the main two. We work with Steve Foster and figure out what we need in the buildings. We have some in our budget, and he also covers expenses. If we needed like a boiler replaced during a year that we hadn't anticipated, he's got money that will cover that. And then technology, the network manager works with us. We do have an IT director, Mike Grant, but he works closely with John Highland, and I always forget the network manager.
Oh, yeah.
Him.
It will come to you at the end.
Yeah,
It will.
when I stop trying.
On the way home.
Yep. Services provided include some that are unique to the schools or municipal departments, and some that are shared.
All right, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the budget overview. So we'll talk about the strategic plan and the school committee budget directives, the annual budget timeline, the FY25 budget pressure points, the FY25 budget goals, FY25 additional considerations, FY25 superintendent's recommended budget, and the next steps. And at this point, it would be the school committee's voted on budget.
Just going to ask that, is the school committee approved?
Yes.
Yeah.
Those sounded a little bit like Jeopardy categories for a second. Anyway, so this budget, as all of our previous budgets, is based on our strategic plan, which has three main objectives: equity for all students, and that's really, in a nutshell, to ensure that all students are provided equal access to an excellent education, consistent and rigorous curriculum, to provide a consistent and rigorous curriculum that encourages all students to learn to the depth and distance of their abilities and leave our schools with the skills and knowledge necessary to succeed in college, career, and life, and targeted professional practice. And that's to hire and develop excellent educators who utilize data, professional development, and collaboration to continually adapt their practices to best meet the needs of all students. School committee budget directives.
I'm sorry, can I just, and I know this, but it's not in the forefront of my brain right now. How often do you re-examine the strategic plan? Is that annually?
So the strategic plan is actually up. We'll be bringing it to the committee this late spring.
Okay.
It went through this school year, and so it is time
Is
to.
it a 3-year, 5-year?
We typically do three years, and there's a lot of plans, a lot of terminology batted around. So schools every year have a school improvement plan at every school.
That might be what I'm thinking of, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so the school councils and each school has a school improvement plan. We bring that to the school committee every year, and they present. And the strategic plan is more that bigger picture vision
Yep.
from which everything else flows, and they align. And the superintendent also comes each year with superintendent's goals.
Gotcha.
And
Perfect.
those are done at the beginning of the year and then at the end of the year.
Thanks.
They are reviewed. School committee budget directives plan and integrate recommendations from the special education review. Focus budget needs on future increases in salary and benefits for faculty and staff. Retained and/or add necessary teaching positions to support the core teaching and learning mission. Creative programming and special education. Maintain class sizes to meet our guidelines with no classes exceeding 25 students at the elementary. And you can see the goals there for our guidelines that we shoot for. And we've had a lot of success in the last few years. Align the budget with the strategic objectives and initiatives outlined in the strategic plan. Ensure that the budget aligns with identified early indicators of success, resources needed, and ensure the annual operating budget supports the long-term budget plan and timing and completion of the school projects as part of Facilities Master Plan 2, which we're very excited about. And I just can't believe every time I drive by the middle school that it seems like there's another, they're walling in another section. Continue to provide the faculty with up-to-date instructional resources and professional development, and allocate library media specialists with specific funding to build and maintain their collections, and recommend and budget for programs and initiatives to improve the progress of high-need learners here in the district, and to ensure adequate progress for all students, including special education services, parent learning and community engagement, and exploration of summer and other programming for students at academic risk. So if you can take a look here at our timeline, we're going to do a couple things here. We're going to take a look back, and then we'll take a look at where we are, and then a look forward. So if you take a look back in from FY22 to FY24 currently, in FY22 we saw a protracted set of educational and social and emotional needs of our students and families due to the pandemic, which were significantly more expansive than we've seen in the past. We took steps in the FY23 budget to provide additional support for the positions needed for our students and staff as we navigated the lingering effects of COVID-19. The FY23 budget included $1,190,000 in operating funds and $1,040,000 in ESSER funds to fund recovery positions that addressed unfinished learning and attended to the social and emotional needs of our students. And when we prepared last year, going into this current year, the FY24 budget, we took a really close look at, keeping in mind recovery services as we were moving forward, both in terms of our students' academic progress as well as their social emotional development. And currently this year, the inclusion of $1,040,000 in additional funding in the FY24 budget, it offset the loss of the ESSER funding and completed our dependence on the outside funding, which were the ESSER and the federal grants. And what that did is what you'll see, and they're talking quite a bit about it in the news, is you'll see a funding cliff where districts hired a lot of positions and didn't really have a plan to sustain that. I saw that once in this district years ago with funding, probably about maybe 12 or 15, maybe 15 years ago now, Jim, might have been before your time, where the grants ended and all of a sudden we're out these positions. And so really, over the last 3 years, to add 31 positions, and that's classroom teachers, special educators, 2 parent liaisons, one who speaks Spanish, one who speaks Portuguese, counselors, 1 for each level, school psychologists, to name just a few, were really critical in us getting ahead. And as we look at FY '25, we had planned for this to be a level services year, with, as we planned for as the projects come online, moving in the future, including the middle school, those positions will be funded as we go forward. All right, and then FY '26 and '27, depends on when the middle school finishes, but we have budgeted for the positions necessary to fill that wing. I think some of you, well, maybe some of you weren't around in 2004 when we opened the new high school, and we had, I don't know, close to $3 million in cuts. And so we had this beautiful new school. We had an awesome enrollment, but we cut about $1 million at each level. And that was significant. So we had, a new school and not the ability to put staff in those buildings. And then FY '27 would be the future projects. And depending on how they go, it will be as those come online. And the next project after this is really the Kittredge, and hopefully Jim will break ground in 2027. Summer of '27?
Yeah, we're hoping for earlier than that, but that's what it looks like now, yes.
Okay. All right. So, next slide, Jim. Jim, do you want to talk about the budget pressure points?
Yeah, there's some of those. The first one is only there because it looks like a high percentage increase. It's not a lot of money, actually, but the number of teachers who are taking advantage of the 403B match increases each year, so we accounted for that. If somebody contributes at least $250, then they get a $250 match. Contracted services, supplies, and materials, no surprise. Inflation continues to impact everybody, and including those items. Salaries, this one's the biggest one. As an impact of inflation, employees demanded higher salaries to account for that and to allow them to continue their standard of living. And as other districts negotiated contracts and accounted for that, the rest of us, as we were negotiating, had to keep up in order to make sure we keep our employees. So most of our groups are what we call a market adjustment in order to stay competitive, and that's reflected in the budget and in their salary lines. Transportation, that was supposed to, I think I took the uncorrected one. That one actually went out to bid last year, so it got an annual increase built into the contract, so we've accounted for that. And then out-of-district tuitions, we're a 1-year lag on that one. The OSD, which regulates this, allowed for a 14% increase after we had already submitted last year's budget for private out-of-district placement providers, and that's between $500,000 and $600,000 impact on us. So we had to. That's why you see such a large increase in our out-of-district tuition line, because we had to play catch-up to that one.
I'm sorry. Can you just can you walk through that a little bit more granularly? Good
job.
Thank you.
Yeah, you got every syllable there.
It's going to come across real bad if I didn't. So.
Well, let's see. Do you want to be more specific?
I don't.
I think that's what he was
To
asking.
be honest with you, I wanted to see what you came back with first.
Okay.
If I'm being truthful.
I'll give it a shot. So, as you know, the school committee approves a budget beginning of February, and then we have town meeting in May, and sometime last spring, the OSD, and I'm not sure why it takes place then. Maybe it has to do with the state budget rather than local budgets.
Right.
But they allowed, based on the same factors I was talking about earlier, where those schools are experience in inflation and competition for their employees, they allowed for a 14% increase in what they charge school districts who send students to them. And so, obviously, we hadn't accounted for it, and it's going to show in this year's, our ability to try to meet this year's budget. It's having a huge impact on that. And we had to, for the FY25 budget, make sure we increased enough to account for that increase, which this year's budget had not accounted for.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sure.
Nope.
I was just gonna say, so does this year's budget, what you put for this year's budget, assume just the same number of out-of-district placements, but with this increased cost? Or did you also assume there could be more out-of-district placements coming in? Like, do you do some, let's say, contingency planning for, there might be somebody who moves in tomorrow?
Yeah, a little bit. And what we're allowed to do within, our budget. Every year, we track each student and where they are, and some of them are aging out and some of them are graduating, so those are coming off. And we anticipate some additional students coming in, and we try to give ourselves a little bit of a buffer because, as we're seeing now, not to the degree we're seeing right now, because we just had some move-ins from other states. What happens is if you get a move-in from within the state, that sending district's going to have to cover it until the next year. But we've got some that have come from New Jersey and New York that are large, placements of $200,000, and we have to start covering that immediately. So it's why we had the stabilization fund in place for situations like that.
So my question was almost the exact same thing that you were going to ask, but came out. So just so I have this right here, the extra $300,000, I'm just looking at your spreadsheet here, the tuition out of district that went up by 13.33%. That's this tuition increase, which is about $300,000. Does that
Right,
make sense?
and we anticipate because so it's interesting, right? Because we got less circuit breaker this year because our claims last year were lower, but this year's claims are much higher.
Yeah.
So our circuit breaker amount that we'll get next year will be higher.
Okay, so
Yep.
jump. Okay, so, but again, just piggybacking on what Gina had to say is, did you get unanticipated students in this year? I mean, you were like, oh gosh, like how many?
Right, and normally, well, I just said a couple there.
Yeah.
There were probably a couple of others that were either we won't have to cover until next year, or
Okay.
were average tuition amount, which right now is about $68,000 to $70,000 a year. Still
Okay.
substantial, but not like some of the others.
So it's like the 300, then it's like the 300,000 plus your unanticipated additions of physical students.
Mhm.
So what would that number be? Kind of ballparky, I know it's.
For the amount?
For
we're actually.
the amount that was just like, this is gonna be over because
Yeah,
of
and we'll
this
be
reason.
coming forward pretty soon with that detail.
Okay.
We'll have I could give you an estimate, but
Well, just give me a ballpark and I'm just gonna put it in, we'll ask more later.
yeah, right now we're looking at over what we're anticipated with the OSD increase
Yep.
and students coming in and the added cost of tuition for transportation for those, a little over $1 million right now.
Okay,
Yeah,
like a surprise, yeah, like that,
yeah,
that's wonderful,
yeah,
okay.
But we're talking about that's this current year.
correct.
Yeah.
Right.
But this current year, but needs to be
But you'll
covered.
be
It'll need to be-
underfunded $1 million in the out-of-district costs.
For this year,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. Okay. It's always a wonderful surprise.
Well, I mean, besides, doing our best, because again, sometimes you do have those unanticipated costs when you have
Yeah.
a couple kids move from out of state. And rightfully so, getting the services that not only are required by law, but that they need to succeed in an individualized education plan. But, this is where we've been able to build capacity too. So some districts use the term, which I abhor, they say cost avoidance. We've come up with good programming, like partnering with Andover in the TOPS program for 18 to 22, and that's a significant cost that
Yeah.
we do not incur because it's a program that we're running with we're
doing
splitting
that.
staff,
Been doing that for
but
a
to
while,
send
yeah.
students out
Mhm.
would be a significant cost.
Yeah.
So,
No,
One- one other
I
thing-
understand there's not a lot you can do about a student that moves into district in the middle of the year. I mean,
Right.
You still
And-
have to provide for those kids.
Right, and as we moved forward at the end of last year, knowing the OSD had occurred, the state was saying, oh, we're gonna try to see what we can do. Well, they didn't end up doing anything, other than they provided an opportunity through the same circuit breaker program, where we were able to submit to them our expected eligible claims for this year, and if they were 10% over, which we're well over that, there will be some reimbursement coming back to us. So there will be some offset to that deficit.
Okay.
Yep.
as we look at the budget goals for this budget, salary market adjustments, I think as Jim mentioned earlier, this is really the key initiative of this budget, is to address the funding increases, future increases that we'll have for next year in salary and benefits for faculty and staff. Look, we recognize their hard work, dedication, and we're committed to providing them with competitive compensation and benefits to retain and attract talented educators. Certainly across the state and across the country, you're seeing retention rates drop. You're seeing less people go into this profession, and we've been fortunate to have one of the higher retention rates on the north of Boston at about 91%.
We are seeing it with our posted positions, though. We are hardly getting any applicants. It's amazing. We used to get 200 for a position, and now it's like, well, we don't have any applicants.
Really?
For some positions, yeah. Yeah.
And, again, like a classroom teacher, we used to see 200 applications on a regular basis, and we're fortunate still to have qualified people, and we have a group of people that's adequate, maybe back to maybe 20 years ago when people were applying. But at the same time, I think Jim's right. We're fortunate that this seems to be a place that folks want to come work, and I think I tell people all the time, when we hired the assistant superintendent, Pam Lathrop, we stole her from Andover, to the good side here, and but we had 41 applications for that job, and we had 25 sitting principals, a bunch of assistant superintendents, and a few superintendents, believe it or not, applying for that job. Whereas there was a community in the Merrimack Valley that had an opening. They were paying $10,000 more, and they only saw less than a handful. So this is a place folks want to work, but it is becoming more challenging. So to be able to retain and attract people is just as important as well. Adjust to the changing needs associated with post-pandemic student needs. Continue to pursue enrichment, equity, and assessment opportunities. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. Continue to identify and address student needs based on findings and recommendations from the multiple reviews, and I'll talk about the multiple reviews shortly.
So this is just the detail behind what we just talked about with the pressure points. You can see the notes address those pressure points. It's 8.33%, but it's $5,000 for that 403B match. Continuing to try to catch up with inflation, so we increased contracted services by almost 3%. And library books, again, 89.66%, but that's just playing catch up. A lot of grant money that was providing funding for the library books went away, so we're bringing that back up by $10,000.
Wait,
And-
sorry, I was looking at something else. Can you repeat that about the library?
Yeah, so we got a lot of money during COVID that we were able to use for library books. But that's all gone now, so we're adding back into the budget for library. So we added $10,000. That's why it looks like such a big percentage. And then you see all the salaries with the market adjustments. Custodians are negotiating this year. We put 5. The nurses are the same as the teachers, but that's 7%, and the reason it's not the same as salaries professional is because in that category are included non-union personnel who aren't getting the same increases as teachers got. And then secretaries' salaries and clerical went up 5%.
So, Dr. Milley, if you,
Yep.
and and I think you said this, but I just want to make sure I heard it correctly, the only contracts that are open now are the custodians?
Custodians and food services, but they're again completely self-sufficient.
Yep, right, as
Yep.
you discussed earlier, yep.
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 So who's an other, that's just flat?
Yeah, so that's teaching assistants, and we anticipate, again, through COVID, we needed more adults in the buildings, but we can't sustain that. So while their salaries went up, the number of TAs will go down to get back to kind of pre-COVID levels.
Yeah.
Yep. Transportation, that's based on the contract increases. It's interesting. It's funny how things work. During COVID, there was a big question. A lot of districts didn't want to pay their transportation contract because they're not going to school, right? And we continued to pay. We had available the buses if we needed them for certain things, but it ended up paying off for us because coming out of COVID, they've provided us with the buses that we need, and the renewal of the next contract, the percentages were a lot less in increases than other districts saw. So that worked out well. We are starting to see, if you're here around town, they're really struggling to get bus drivers right now, just like everything else. And so you might hear about a bus driver that was driving around for a half hour because he was, fairly new and got lost. But it's because of what's going on in the job market.
Quick question.
Yep.
Is that just transportation to and from school, or is there, I'm just curious about transportation to sports events for the athletes and things like that. Are those also covered, or is that not?
Well, they're covered. This is for in-district, regular and special education. Our 240 grant covers the out-of-district transportation, and the athletics revolving account, that's one of the expenses that covers,
The
is the athletic transportation.
Okay.
Yep. And then you see the district out of tuition we talked about, trying to play catch up to that OSD increase. It does leave us with $235,000 that we will try to use to address the reviews that Dr. Gilligan was talking about. We have a go right ahead. I don't want to steal you.
Well, I'm sorry, can I just reverse back before you do that? Apologize. I just have a follow-up question on the OST increase. Do you recall, and you may not, and that's fine if you don't, the last time they increased the prices?
Well, I can tell you that they do each year, but if you look back over the last 10 years, it's been somewhere between 2 and 3% a year.
That's okay. That's what I thought.
Yeah,
So it's been a long time since it went up, jumped.
absolutely.
14. Okay,
Yeah, I can't remember any.
perfect. Thank you.
more.
Has the state talked about providing any kind of help with that? I mean, that seems like a pretty big thing for them to allow. Or is that what you were talking about?
That's
where
what
the
I was talking about
research-
earlier,
Okay,
yeah.
right, okay.
They
I mean, that
kind
seems-
of, without being very clear or specific, said we're gonna try to, and then nothing came, and then, through this year, they made us aware that fill out this form if you intend to apply for
Oh, more than-
emergency relief.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's that. I will say that, it's 5.5% normal, and this is a level services budget with just a little bit left for something else. Normally, in a given year, it's about 3% is level services. And
Right.
you can see the impact of inflation and the salary increases.
I have-
Yeah.
That's right. So all the items that are just completely flat, is that realistic? I mean, do you see, how can you keep all those things flat with inflation? And, I mean, is that what the 235 might cover, spread that around, or?
No, well, Dr. Gilligan's going to talk about that. The other stuff, yes, for the most part, I would say, yeah. I mean, activities, advertising, auto mileage, awards, dues and memberships, those are all controllable to a degree,
Yeah.
The utilities have been coming in. Electricity may be a little high sometimes, but then gas is low. So they kind of offset each other, and they don't go up much. We usually have a 3-year contract for our rates.
Okay.
So yeah, I think it is reasonable for the others.
Okay,
Yep. If, again, 80% of our budget is salaries.
yeah.
All right, can I follow up on, you commented about the electricity, I mean, like, maybe I'm wrong on this, but I thought that electricity was now a shared expense with the town?
This year is the last year it will be in our budget.
25
This year,
this year?
right.
But I mean, you have here in your.
We're budgeting it, but then it will get pulled out and put into a town line, and that amount will be removed from our budget. And then going forward after that, town will be responsible for.
So this is like an in-between year, it's like you're still budgeting it, but they're gonna then pull it in.
Right,
And then
right,
next year, they'll start budgeting it.
exactly.
Because I thought, that's not how I saw the, that's interesting, I'll have to ask our town manager, it doesn't sound like it jives with.
Yeah, I had the
budget.
same question written down, because I thought that
I did
the
too.
budget that
Yeah.
we
it
just
doesn't-
saw included that.
Included that, so, I mean, if that's not the case, I mean.
No, it wouldn't surprise me if the town manager's budget included it, because it will, and maybe she's already done it. We were moving forward
Yeah.
with our budget as is.
I
and-
completely understand
yeah.
why that would be the assumption, that makes sense, I just think it might be, we might have a double entry in there, wouldn't that be something?
Except that our bottom line budget, when it goes to town meeting, will not have electricity or heating fuel in it.
So this number is gonna come out of the total,
And our total amount will be less that, yes,
okay, so the total
Oh,
amount will not
okay.
be the 63 million plus?
correct.
It'll be the same?
That minus electricity and heating fuel.
So, well, I had the same question on, because when Melissa presented the town budget and talked about this point about utilities becoming a shared thing, she referenced, just like we do for postage and photocopies, and I noticed we have postage and photocopies on this, copy machines on this budget, so is that?
Yeah, we've never
those
talked
items
about
will
that.
Also go out? Didn't she mention that?
I thought so too,
And cell phones too.
yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, there's IT things in here too, and I thought the IT, like there's, technology, new replacement technology. I mean, does that go into the IT budget that's shared? We need a breakdown of this, because I'm unclear.
Yeah, I actually wrote, I thought this was shared on a couple of
The
things.
idea
Yeah.
was that the town would start to take better advantage of economies of scale. And so this, as they mentioned, there were some few items, I remember cell
Yeah.
phones as well.
Yeah.
And so, I guess the question here is whether or not that information has made it to you folks, and if so, kind of what the plan is.
Well, it certainly has around the utilities, and
Yeah.
I think Jim's explained that piece. And it may be, and we can check with her.
We've never talked about those items you bring up.
I mean, also
Um,
the software, educational software licenses, those sorts of things, because like IT, like what does that encompass? And there's a lot of IT in here, so.
She certainly could have that intent to have the discussion.
Yeah.
We haven't had that discussion
Yeah.
yet.
Okay,
We don't have cell phones anymore.
Very few.
Well, not that we pay for in the budget.
We might have a few. Yeah, because might have just a.
We
just
have a-
Gilly has a phone, just,
Yeah, well,
No, there might be a couple of community programs.
but they would pay for them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, out of the revolving.
okay.
But yeah, we have our own contract for copiers.
Okay.
The only,
Yeah,
the
that was
only,
one she definitely mentioned.
She
Yeah,
did.
but,
Yes.
so here's the thing, I don't think that, those specific secondary ones were with regard to the town departments, not, I think her thing was
Oh.
the school department, sorry, I just whacked this thing, apologies to Cam, and the people at home. I think what she said was, she's gonna start with the schools with the fuel and
okay.
electricity,
Okay.
right? Then now she's layering in the town departments with the copiers and all of the stuff you talked about, see how that goes, and then come back and talk to the school folks. That's how I
Let's
understood it.
verify that for
Yeah,
sure.
because I think, definitely think
100%.
the electricity part, I'm pretty sure that has been added into her budget, so I think that might be something definitely worth exploring. I just would want verification.
Yeah,
Saying
I just
yes.
found the presentation, and it does say moved copy machine leases from all municipal budgets
Right.
to the
Okay.
IT
Right.
budget.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
So,
We're just trying to find you some more money here.
Right.
That's fine by us.
Yeah.
yeah,
But so I mean, let's, can we also try and clarify the IT, like what I have, there's been shared IT for a while.
now. Yeah.
But so obviously there's some IT things on here.
So
Like-
the IT stuff in our budget is for Mike Grant and for the work that we do for the schools, you know, whether it be infrastructure or whatever it might be.
School-specific.
Yes, the
But
school-specific
like
stuff.
the equipment is paid for out of the school budget, IT equipment, model
Correct.
classroom
Correct.
equipment, we still
So
use
the
that
Mike Grant's
terminology.
salary
We do
is
still
yours.
Yeah.
So it's a salary, that's,
Part
It's
of
shared.
it is,
Part of it
but
is.
it's the materials as well.
yes, yeah.
Yep. But that's been the case for quite a while now.
One other thing to follow up on that, I mean, the spreadsheet, we all obviously looked at this and
Yep.
we're want to ask questions about that. I know the town has got everything on their website. I think it's ClearGov, and there's a new program. Anyway, but what it does is it shows everything that their 2024 budget had, and like everywhere everything was spent. Do you all? Is there something on the website like that really does a breakdown of like this is in even more detail than this? These are expenses, not for what's going forward, but what was spent in 2024.
Yeah, so like I said, every school district has to complete a end-of-year report. We just had, so by September 30th, all the accounts are closed out for the previous year. You
Yeah.
complete the report, submit it to the state. They send out an auditor to audit that end-of-year report. We just had ours this past week. And then they provide that information to the state to show the comparisons. So we just did it for FY23, and when FY24 closes out, I'll have to do the same thing by September 30th. And that information is public information. It shows you
Right.
where every single penny was spent.
So right now, we don't have 2024.
We're still in it.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. But in 2023, because I think I've seen those reports too, is it linked within the school's website? Okay.
Typically is, so
Yeah.
we keep all of our budget documents.
Yeah, because I now that you're saying it, I'm like, oh, that's right. I remember going through those before. And yeah, there's a lag of when you can see the closed amounts. Okay, that's great. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yep.
Sorry, we messed with your flow, Dr. Gilligan.
No, not in the least bit. I'm used to going with the flow.
Used to doing what Dr. Mealy says.
Well, yeah, I mean, we work at schools, so, I mean, we can always adapt and adjust.
We'll appreciate it.
Additional consideration, so as of right now, we're undergoing 3 external reviews, major reviews, and also a extracurricular subcommittee review. And so currently, we're in the process of having an equity audit, and that's a focus on our schools. We're working on that now. I think you've seen some information blasted out for those who are parents, putting together some working groups, focus groups. But we have that happening, and they're also doing work townwide as well. We thought it made a lot of sense, Melissa and I, working together to say, okay, this equity review won't only just be the schools, but they'll look at all the town departments as well. So we're excited about that. We have a special education review, and we should have those results for the 21st of this month. The group will be coming in to present to the school committee. And we've also this year had an extensive, a second one, this is the second one we've had, a school security review. So we really believe that these reviews will provide us with valuable insights and recommendations for continuous improvement. And the findings and recommendations from these reviews are expected, we're going to get the one on the 21st. The equity will probably be closer towards the end of the year, the end of the school year anyway. Released later this spring, and to prepare for their potential impact, we've set aside $235,624, and that's where you'll see later where it says review recommendations. It's about 0.39% of the budget for funding, and those will be the first steps that may be necessary. But please note that these reviews, it's only the beginning of what will require multi-year budgeting in order to fully implement the recommended changes. So, we've set that aside, planning on the reviews and what they say, and we'll take a look at all three of those and then take the first steps that we need regarding that. So,
All three of those were through ARPA funding.
yep.
How did you arrive at 235,000 for an initial?
That was what was left after level services. So when you saw all
What do you mean,
those.
what was left? Because you put a target out there of 5.5?
Well, the 5.5.
Okay.
Yes, that's what was left after the 5.5. Correct.
Close cushion.
I mean, it was,
Okay.
we had to look and really
Yeah.
look at adjusting some things to make sure we had something, because this year, again, it really is tight. The key initiative being funding our staff. But we also wanted to be able to take some first steps based on how those recommendations coming in, with the understanding that we won't know what that fully is until probably closer to the end of the school year. We'll get reports, and then it will take some time to synthesize and take a look at what those are and make some decisions based on that.
And I will say, I've said this many times, Dr. Gilligan has said it many times, that we've had a very good partnership with Melissa. She knew our situation, and she tries to run the numbers and tell us how much we can have, and we try to live within that. And it's worked well over the years. And she gave us the 5.5, and that covered our level services and a little bit for the review. And it also with regards to her moving the utilities out, while the last couple of years it hasn't impacted school, when we see a rate increase, it does, because you don't know that's going to happen until that year. And then what ends up happening is an increase impacts what we can provide our students, because we have to make up that difference. So having that out and not having to worry about the variability, fluctuations, is a big help to us.
Yeah, I mean, again, working with Melissa, we meet every Tuesday.
Yeah, no, she's amazing.
For a few hours.
Are even here.
And so, it's quite a partnership, because the last 3 years, we've had the ability to put on 31 staff. And, 28 of those positions are student-facing positions. Then we have the 2 parent liaisons, and we have a math director. And we've been really adamant that we needed these positions. We needed this to support students and staff. And we've made significant gains in a whole bunch of areas, particularly class size. And so, working together, it's been quite a few years, and it's also the ability to plan for the future so that we can marry operating budgets with the capital projects, right?
Yep.
So that everything comes together in a way that probably it just wasn't possible in many of the years past for whatever particular reasons. I mean, the budgets, again, they've been tight. I've said before, typically, on a good year, we'd get 3.5%. 3% was level services to keep what we had. 0.5% on a $50 million budget, Jim, what's that, $250,000 for new initiatives. And, I can remember once writing for a former superintendent, terrific, we're adding a 0.25 reading interventionist. Like, hashtag leading the nation. This is wonderful. But, there were a lot of years where we just,
We were negative.
we were
We
negative.
did.
Yeah, or
There
cutting.
were budgets that were down 1.5 or 2%.
And
I
so,
remember.
yeah.
It was
and
exciting.
So it's been an exciting few years, and again, it's not just Melissa, but we work really well with police, fire, the town accountant, Lori and Dee. I mean, it's a collaborative effort, and I think working together, we're able to advocate for what we need and move forward. So the FY24 budget is the current year we're at $60,364,000. Level services at the 5.11% is $3,084,404. The reviews that I mentioned earlier, the equity, security, special education, extracurricular review, we put aside $235,624 for a total increase of $3,320,028 to equal the 5.5%, with an overall FY25 budget voted on by the school committee, it's $63,684,174.00. And,
Can I say something?
yeah, well, it sounds like you're going to.
So Dr. Gilligan mentioned parent liaisons, and those were some, it's interesting, COVID came and all of this ESSER funding came. We had a long-term plan for all these support services that Dr. Gilligan was just talking about, and then COVID came, and that allowed us to, adapt to COVID and react to it. The ESSER funding allowed us to bring those positions on board, and then we, working with Melissa, we increased the budget each year in order to be able to maintain those. Yep.
And
So I wasn't done yet.
Oh, sorry. It's like I've been married to Jim for a long years.
So the parent liaisons, people asked, and I remember being at FinCom, and people said, so what are those going to do? And they are there to help our new parents navigate the system, especially maybe non-English speaking, new to the country. And I think we get more positive feedback from families about the parent liaisons. They have really made an impact. And actually, it's funny, the research shows that one of the things that has the greatest impact on student achievement is parent self-efficacy. If parents feel like they can help and they can navigate the system, they're more likely to influence and impact their children's student achievement.
Did you write a doctoral dissertation on this?
I did. But I just wanted to report back to you guys that asked me then, let us know how it goes. It's going really well.
Great. That's terrific.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good to hear.
And at the end of the day, right, like, I think some people just don't realize, almost 25% of our students, right, 1 in 4 in this district, is considered low income by DESE. Might be like 23 and change percentage. But that means they receive some type of governmental benefit in order to be labeled as that. We have over 44 languages in the district. If you haven't caught WBZ radio recently, we were on. Guy called up one day. We have a new copier down there. We tried it out right here at school committee.
It's amazing.
You can take any document, put it through, and it will create, it's particularly with our flyers and stuff.
Yep.
It will create it, you put it any language you want. I did a handwritten note,
It's
translates.
it's amazing.
right?
Amazing.
It was-
There was a thing when they had their last school committee meeting. I
Right.
was watching, and yeah.
You know, so I think
Yeah.
I think we're up to 44 languages within this district, and then there's just, I think that you just never know what shoes people are walking in this environment, today's age. And we have to meet kids and families where they are, and so some people are surprised that we offer adult English class down at the library every Monday night for parents, and we've had a good turnout. So the parent liaisons, the ability to have access to schools is really important, because oftentimes when we talk about kids that maybe have socioeconomic disadvantages, now we're starting to get into my dissertation.
There it is.
We're talking about they may have heard 2 million less words by the time they enter kindergarten than another kid. They don't get necessarily behind at school. It's in all these other opportunities, like enrichment, like trips, like museums in the summer. And so our ability to be able to offer these things through community programs, to have all this different support staff, it makes a difference, because I think sometimes folks think of, I can't tell you how many people are surprised when I tell them about our percentage of low income, or how many languages we have in the district. Or that a couple of years ago, I remember Chet Jackson in his high school graduation speech said 25 different graduates of this class were born in 25 different foreign countries. People are really surprised because they confuse us with Andover. Even though we are the original Andover, they get confused in this day and age. And Andover has a significantly bigger budget. Student-wise, I don't think they're all that much bigger than us. Maybe 700 or 800 students more district-wide. But I think people have a perception, and it's just not. It doesn't necessarily match up with our school demographic and the challenges in which we face. And that's the strength of our community too, by the way. And it's really a pleasure, and I think I don't want to speak for you, Jim, but I will.
You can.
I feel honored that we have the ability to lead a district like this in a community like this, because we have people that care, and I think they go the extra mile for our kids. So.
Can I ask you a question, kind of piggyback off that with your parent liaison? I know, I watched a few school committee meetings because, anyway, and I did watch the CPAC presentation, and and in what they were looking to do, and literally to have a program to help parents navigate another very complicated system. So I was kind of wondering, you know, if you had had any more conversations with that, or I know it didn't seem like, it seemed like a reluctance, or I don't want to paraphrase it, the $7,000 that they were looking for. Is there any avenue for providing any funding for what they want to do, or at least maybe start doing that, to put money in something so that in the future they could have programs to help parents navigate an extremely complicated system, even for the brightest of us?
In the past, they would request from the executive director or assistant superintendent. The titles changed over the years, and those funds have been provided through the operating budget. I do know that Marcy, our current executive director for special education, has met with them, and I think is going to meet with them again to continue to discuss how we can support them and they can support us, and we can work together.
Yeah, I never thought real hard about that, what it happens when people enter the system. And of course, I have a grandson now, I mean, and he's in a different town, but nevertheless, he's had to start to poke into, you know, they've had to do that. And I was just like, you're kidding me, like what they have to go through, it's, oh my goodness, it's a lot. And the services, this is in Haverhill, the services are wonderful, but it isn't it isn't a simple process. And you could see where you would want to have somebody saying like, hey, I can help you with that. I can help you navigate it. We know what to do. We're the pros. You're new. Come to us. It's huge.
I have a quick follow-up question. You mentioned that 40 different languages are spoken here. Is that the right statistic?
44.
44. And then 25% of the students here come from...
They're categorized by the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education as low income.
I wouldn't have gotten that. Thank you. Can you tell me in comparison where does or do you know where Andover sits with those statistics?
I can't. The Andover, you know, typically does not come up as one of our comparable communities. So, like, you know, one of the things we've looked at over the years is, years ago, Miss Allen may have been on the school committee. When Chuck Ormsby came up with a list of 20 communities that he thought were comparable communities to North Andover, and, you know, as a district, our comparable communities often can come up as North Attleboro, you know, and it's a wide range. And then the state will take like populations and match them up, and those are called our DART communities, D-A-R-T. And then each school can have their own comparables as well. Again, in the past, and I don't know them exactly by heart in front of me right now, but in the past, you know, for example, you know, in some ways we're more like a Woburn or a North Attleboro than an Andover.
Wilmington, or I'm trying to think of it.
I'm just trying to get a frame of reference.
Bridgewater,
Like,
Raynham.
is 44 a lot, or is it a little, just trying to...
Language-wise?
Yeah.
I think that's something that we have seen grown. We've seen grown over the years. You know, there are other districts that, you know, we border 7 communities, right? It's interesting. North Andover borders 7 communities. We border Boxford, North Reading, Middleton, and Andover. Okay, and some of those districts might only have 10 or 11 ELs.
And Lawrence, too.
Well, those are the 4. There's 4 I mentioned so far. I haven't done the other 3 yet.
Okay.
Don't steal my thunder there. But, you know,
It's cold in here. I'm getting hypothermia, so...
I think one year
I see you guys are clawing back the savings now.
One year I partnered with some low incidence districts. It wasn't one of them, but it was something similar to a North Reading or an Andover.
Yeah.
And I think that they had 10 students total that were receiving EL services, and at the time we had 103.
Okay.
So, you know, that's significant. And then we border Lawrence, Methuen on the river, and Haverhill. And those are, you know, Lawrence and Haverhill are gateway cities. Lawrence is the poorest city of town in the Commonwealth and the 22nd poorest city of town in the United States. And so, you know, and we're a mix of all of these different things. So comparatively, compared to some of the suburbs, we're absolutely probably a higher percentage of low income, and, you know, we have maybe some more languages. It used to be like Lowell has 70 languages, and we used to have maybe 25, maybe 20 a decade ago. You know, now I say 44 people, it really blows them away, particularly because they're like, wow. And a lot of it's a strength, right? Just because we have 44 different languages, a lot of those kids don't necessarily receive EL services because they speak Hindi, they speak Mandarin, they're bilingual or trilingual, and that's something we encourage, so, I could find out for you.
No need. I was just curious. I was just trying to get a frame of reference, just anecdotally as we're kind of going through this. But appreciate the effort. But thank you.
I'm just curious to and I know with 44 languages, I don't know if there's a couple that are kind of more prevalent, but do the parent liaisons, are they bilingual at all?
Yes, so one parent liaison speaks Spanish,
Yeah.
and the
The other one.
Dominican.
Yeah.
I believe she's Dominican, from the Dominican Republic, and the other's Portuguese, and we're seeing a lot of Portuguese, Brazilian.
Okay.
So those are the two biggest languages.
Okay.
I'd say Portuguese is one we've seen grow more recently, and the Spanish has been steadily growing.
That's great.
So it's hiring the bilingual parent liaisons was a huge. I mean, I am talking. They do everything.
Because like you said, probably a lot of the kids are bilingual, but the parents aren't, and they're the ones that have to navigate all
Yeah.
this.
Right.
Exactly.
Can I going back to comparables, they're interesting because if you want to compare your achievement to a district, you want to compare it to a district that has very similar demographics, as like you as possible. But when we negotiate, everyone wants to talk about comparables, but realistically, our comparables are who's around us, and everyone wants to say we're not Andover. We are absolutely in competition with Andover for staff.
Yeah.
And so you can't use those comparables. North Andover, we're not in competition with them for staff.
Right.
We're in competition geographically. So it's geographical comparables versus similarities for achievement.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any additional questions for our esteemed panelists?
This is great. Thank you.
No, really, guys, really appreciate the time, the effort that went into the presentation and the answers to our numerous questions. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I thought, Regina, did you have another
I was
question?
gonna ask a question, yeah, you like, questions? Oh, let's wrap it up.
Who wants to go
Regina,
home?
you already reached your allotted questions.
You're getting the side eye right now.
I know, I really am.
No, go ahead.
I just remember, I was thinking about, the recovery services and referring to those being from COVID, and while yes, I guess a specific part of that, I think, is the social emotional impact, not just the academic impact. And I remember we hired, or one of the budgets a couple time or two ago had, where we were adding staff, we saw like numbers of staff and what positions and stuff, and there was a social emotional director or a person, I can't remember. I wanted to just ask, do we still have those people like in those positions, social emotional, and how's that program going, or like things that they're working on? Because I still feel like, just anecdotally from what I hear in the community, like that's still a concern and something that we need to keep addressing.
Yeah, I mean, it's an ongoing addressing. So to be really clear, the challenges particularly that people faced socially and emotionally, and our students, families, prior to the pandemic, they still exist, but they were certainly exacerbated.
Yeah.
I mean, and you ask any family, I mean, I tell people all the time, whether it's substance use, whether it's mental health, you name it, it impacts every family. And oftentimes, the nice thing is we try to connect people and say, like, you're not alone, and there's nothing to be ashamed about, because it still carries a little bit of stigma for some folks, right? So, yes, we still have a director of social emotional learning, Michelle O'Leary. It was previously Nikki Murphy, and Nikki left for private industry. And
Adjustment counselor,
it
social workers.
well, the director of SEL, when that job was hired, it had done a lot of work primarily with our Tier 3 programs involving special education. And a true director of social emotional learning isn't a focus on special education.
Right,
it's
yeah.
all students.
Yeah.
And so we've kind of redone that job. And, more importantly, with the recovery services, we added an additional elementary counselor, an additional middle school counselor, an additional high school counselor, added a social worker, 2 social workers to programs, and she oversees those folks as well, and they're really important. So,
Great, I'm glad to hear they're still, because I know you guys can kind of reallocate, as you said, based on changes that come up, and I just wanted to, I guess, confirm that those positions were still there and filled. 'Cause I think
You're
those are very
absolutely right
important.
about
Yeah.
the need. Yep.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, my questions are done now.
All right. Anybody else? That was my fault. Questions came up. I didn't remember my teachings from Finance Committee Chair School. Yeah.
It was a long time ago.
It was. It was. All right. Well, thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. Have a good
Very
night,
much.
and I think we'll be out of your building shortly. So.
All right.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you.
And real
All right.
quick, Andover's 11.2%.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, lower.
Thank you very much.
All right. We have a couple more things on our agenda here, but I think they're going to be quick. So the next item is discussion of Finance Committee letter. I don't know that we need to discuss it, although I'm happy to take any questions that anybody has.
I just have one.
Okay, hold on. Can I just finish
about
my
the-
thought?
About the letter. Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so if you noticed in our packets for this evening, the list of assignments was included. Here we go. So the schools were Regina and Ken. Municipal and shared expense was Eva. Retiree healthcare was Brianna. Reserves was Nancy. Enterprise funds was Keith. And capital improvement was Dustin. So I'm completed. You can ask your question now.
I was just wondering whether we ought to add a blurb about the CPC and what is coming before them. I mean, even if it's just a little quick overview, or would that be just redundant?
I don't know that it'll be redundant. I know that we added it last year specifically because we had some votes because of the way the votes came down.
Yeah.
I'm not opposed to that. Certainly, I'm not. Wouldn't. Anybody else can share their
Well, I mean,
opinions. But what I was going to say just is, why don't we wait and see what comes
Oh,
from
yeah.
their presentation?
Yes.
And if it's typical of a common year, then I don't know that we
Yeah.
need to, but I'm open to that.
It's just that, I mean, like, what we went through last year probably was a reflection on our part in the finance committee, but, I mean, the CPC, is that we weren't talking as much, we weren't paying attention as much to what the other was doing. And, these things bubble up, because it's just like, hey, what it was, it was awkward, it wasn't great.
Yeah.
I mean, although I think a healthy way for it to resolve, it was like we had questions and, or differences of opinion. Nothing wrong with differences of opinion. And this year, it's a little bit more on my radar, and I've been watching their meetings. I watch all the meetings, and which is great to watch the presentations. And it's just like, why haven't I been doing this before? Because watching the presentations before the CPC, and there aren't as many this year. But I was just like, it's very insightful in the questions that the committee has and the limitations that the committee has. You hear a lot more about that anyway. So obviously, I think they've had everybody in front of them who is presenting an application, and they have not made their recommendations yet. So yes, you would have to, but after they do make their recommendations, maybe it's something that we would. It's
Absolutely.
just like, how does this fit with it? How do we feel about it? Or just a basic.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't even mind doing that, but I just.
I heard you
it
just
has-
heard you volunteer.
well,
I'm
it's
all
like-
for it now.
Yeah, let's put it this way. I sort of assume if I'm bringing it up, it would be something that I would have to do. But
I have no opposition. I think
and that would be something I would, I chat with Bill about,
Yeah.
what do you think, and then just a town perspective. It's just another way to put it in front of the general public as to, hey, this is what's coming up.
Yeah, no, I think it's great, and I think it's a significant
That's a lot of money.
expenditure
Yes.
from year to year, so it's certainly not unwarranted. I have no issue with it.
It's a
So
huge
when it comes
taxpayer
up,
expense.
yeah, when it comes up, we can absolutely
Yeah,
talk about that.
Yeah.
I think it's a good idea.
yeah. They had some interesting things come in front of them, so.
Good.
Anyway.
All right, so I've now gotten off my agenda. I think the only other thing we have here is, yes, approval of minutes from February 29th, our leap year meeting. So they were included in your packet.
Want to see it?
I just want to take a look because Julian emailed me to make sure she got a motion I made correct, and I just want to make
I
sure.
think the motion's
Was it
on
the,
second or third page, it's towards the end. She
Yeah,
has all
the-
motions.
Sorry.
On the financial,
Oh, yeah.
on the financial reserve policy.
Yeah, because we were kind of screwing up with the motions there, just a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, that's accurate. I did suggest putting a couple clarifying words, but whatever, it's fine. It's still accurate.
If it works for you, make
No,
motion.
it works, it's
Sure.
fine, it's fine, it's
sure?
fine, yeah.
Okay. All right, well then, I would entertain a motion on the minutes.
I move to accept the meeting minutes of February 29, 2024 as written.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Brianna, thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it, so I would certainly entertain one last motion if anybody's amenable to making it. It is for adjournment.
Move that we adjourn.
Thank you, Nancy. We have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Chris. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned at 8:18. Thank you all very, very much.